Mr. Richard Fuller, who is here in person.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. And it's right as our hard-working business leaders emerge from the most torrid 12 months that the government sets a clear course for their understanding of how those businesses will be taxed in the future. And of course, I would have hoped it would have been heartening for those people who've been running businesses through these most difficult times to have been able to listen in to this debate, to hear what members of Parliament have to say on their behalf. Personally speaking, Mr. Speaker, I think most people who run businesses will be rather saddened by what they have heard, largely a perspective that somehow it's wrong for people to run businesses that are profitable, that there is a sin in becoming rich by creating a business that creates products that people want, rather than a virtue, a complete lack of understanding that businesses that make profits are a sign of success rather than a sign of failure. Mr. Chairman, personally, I'm rather in favour of us increasing taxes, and I wonder that when this government or any government seeks to increase tax on corporations, whether they realise that essentially they're putting a tax on success, that every pound that we take away from a business, from its profits, is a pound taken away from things that the business owner may do him or herself. You know, radical things like, for example, expanding the number of people that work for the business, or perhaps investing in machinery that will make their business more competitive in terms of exports, or perhaps lowering their debt so that they're on a more substantial, more stable footing for the long term. Every time a state takes away money from enterprise, it is putting at risk the resources that those companies have to do those things. It is putting at risk the future success of this country. And therefore, the government was right to consider carefully how to balance a change in corporation taxes. And given what has happened subsequent to the budget, I think the Chancellor deserves a bit of a pat on the back for understanding what will be going on in the global realm of corporation tax, as well as understanding the crucial importance of providing some short-term incentive for businesses to invest as we emerge from the recession. Now, it would be a little bit, I always like to be as honest as I can, particularly having been a Member of Parliament on and off the last 10 years. I have stood on a platform where we have argued for a reduction in corporate tax rates, saying that if we reduce corporate tax rates, the corporate tax rate will go up. And now I'm looking at measures in this budget that say as we increase corporate tax rates, the overall corporate tax will go up. Now that's a miraculous tax, Mr. Chairman, that goes up whether you cut it or increase it, but such are the vagaries of public finances. I would, though, like to just comment. It was rather interesting. I was listening with great interest to the shadow spokesman speaking. And then I looked at the number of amendments that were down. And it does seem that his boss's predecessor, the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington, has a lot more active understanding of what the Labour Party policy on corporation tax may be than the current opposition front bench. And I was just wondering why the name of the opposition leader opposition wasn't attached to the former Shadow Chancellor's amendments. Is it because there's somehow a loss of radicalism on the Labour front bench? Have they got fricked in terms of some of the policies that their backbench now or their former leadership wanted to see? On our side, I think it is important for us to respond to the proposals that the United States seem to be putting forward for a global minimum tax. There's not, in essence, something that's completely, in principle, wrong about that, although I'd be interested if my right honourable friend, the Minister, would say if there is any precedent for UK tax policy on international treaties to be struck in such a way as providing for a minimum, and whether there has been an assessment by the Treasury of what the implications for that would be. But I would also urge the Treasury to realise that the crux of our approach on our relations with these global multinationals, particularly with the digital multinationals, is that there is a substantial amount of wealth that gets created and profits that get generated which are not directly associated or tied to the sales of that enterprise within that country. And so therefore there's a bit of bait and switch with the US proposing a global minimum tax as somehow resolving the need for digital sales tax. So for example, Google makes tremendous amounts of profits from having access to how people look at things online. They don't necessarily sell it in terms of ads, which could be taxed locally, but they can derive products from that, derive innovations, which are profitable for them. But we will never see any tax come to this country from that. And I would say to the Treasury, it is time that we start looking at how in this country we can place data, an ownership of data, like we put an ownership of land, like we put ownership of other assets, so that it is located within the realm of this country. And only then will there be an effective answer for why a global corporation minimum tax from President Biden, is the same and has the same basis as finding a modern tax system for our digital taxes. And my final point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is the issue has been raised a number of times in this debate about the environmental goals that we wish our corporations to, and quite rightly, the Business Department and the Treasury are leading in the country, so the United Kingdom can be a centre for green finance and green investment, and that's entirely correct. However, the Parliament has passed a law to achieve net zero within a certain time frame. We have not really been explicit with the public about what the costs of those may be, but I think we understand that substantial investments will be required to achieve that. I just have gently prod my honourable friend the Minister that longer term, beyond the 5-year frame that we have right now, there will be a need to provide additional incentives. My expectation is there will be a need to provide additional incentives in the form of capital allowances or other form of allowances to enable the private sector to achieve the net zero goals and the investments required for that if we proceed with the increases we will in overall headline corporation tax. And I just leave him to mull that point.